Máting bheith raibhla agus fáilte arás gan bhlog agam, Rio ha fáilte gan seanna lacham, Dír an lanting, fá scríomh agus cur clic ar an ghlach. Agus ha meise a réist dé a freicar sin ceiste a heag Quora me a Gaelic. Good morning everyone, welcome to my blog, or if you're new, welcome to the channel. Like, subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, check out my other content, all that stuff YouTubers say. I am Rachel, and this is another installment in Doric answers questions that Quora has about Scottish Gaelic. Now these questions come from the category Scottish Gaelic in brackets language. And again, I will urge caution if you're a Gaelic speaker and you're interested in checking out the questions that Quora has for Scottish Gaelic, because some of the questions are ignorant and some of the answers are frustratingly offensive. So do that at your own risk. Question today, which I would like to imagine was written by like an old man or woman who's recently immigrated to Scotland. My little part of the Scottish Highlands has a dialect or language called, I think, Doric. What parts of Scotland have this? And would an Englishman, in brackets me, who knows a small number of Gaelic words, be able to speak or / understand any of it? So, no. The end question of that is no. You've a better chance of speaking or understanding Doric through being an Englishman than you have through knowing Gaelic words, because Doric is a dialect of Scots, which, as I've mentioned, is the most closely related language to English. Doric is the name that's used for a dialect spoken, I think, mostly around Aberdeen, but don't quote me on that because I speak Gaelic, not Scots. And I should point out that this name is originally a pejorative because Doric actually refers to a dialect of ancient Greek, which was perceived by the Athenians to be sort of uncultured and backwards and country bumpkinish. So therefore the term was taken by English speakers to describe a way of speaking that they viewed as backwards and stupid and country bumpkinish, which happens to be a dialect of Scots. I do know that there's one of the plays by that annoying Greek guy that I had to translate plays from, Aristophanes? I've obviously wiped my Greek knowledge out of my brain. Anyway, he has a play where the women of Athens withhold sex from the men of Athens until they stop being at war with, I assume, Sparta. It's always Sparta. And there's a Spartan woman. I think she's a Spartan woman? Anyway, she's very obviously Spartan in the Greek because she uses Spartan dialect traits. Doric dialect. I don't know if Spartan was a Doric dialect. As I say, I've not too much knowledge about ancient Greek at this point. And anyway, in English translations, especially English translations done by Englishmen, she is often translated as speaking Scots or having Scots dialect traits. So I think that sort of thing is where it came from, but yeah, in general. The point is, Doric is far more closely related to English than it is to Gaelic. So, to me, as I have grown up around Scots speakers, to me, I feel Scots is generally quite easy to understand, but I understand for a lot of English speakers, it can be quite difficult for them to understand Scots, and Doric is sort of like what's one of the broadest Scots dialects, so like one of the most unlike English. I still think it should be possible for an English speaker to understand some words, certainly would understand the grammar and get the gist of what's happening, I would assume. I mean, I know what's happening when someone's speaking Doric, so but yeah, I suppose there's some Gaelic words that might have been borrowed into Doric, I don't know, but it's not similar to Gaelic at all. So yes, this English gentleman, I presume, would be he says he's English, I don't know if he's a gentleman, he phrases it in an old man sort of way. Anyway, he would be able to probably understand some Doric, but it's not by virtue of being able to speak a small number of Gaelic words. Ceist. How do Scottish Gaelic and Irish noun cases work? Are they similar to the case systems in Slavic languages? They are similar insofar as their case systems, and they're obviously Slavic languages and Celtic languages are both Indo-European, which means that, way back 5,000 years ago, they were exactly the same case system because they were exactly the same language. Don't quote me on that figure, I'm guessing. And case systems are a feature of a lot of European languages, even English. Although we've got rid of most of them, we do still have a genitive case, and when in terms of pronouns, we have a few more cases as well. But that's the extent of the similarity, because Gaelic and Irish have 4 cases: the nominative, the dative, and the genitive, and the vocative. And Slavic languages, I think, have like 7. So there's a lot more cases going on there, and the cases don't necessarily hold the same functions. I do recall someone telling me that Russian doesn't have a vocative case anymore. I don't know if that's true, but Gaelic and Irish definitely do have vocative cases. And the Gaelic dative covers a lot of stuff that, say, if you've learnt German, you would expect to be covered by the accusative. We use the genitive for a lot of things that, like, you don't get that in other languages functioning in that way, or at least not in other European languages. So, I mean, if you're familiar with the case system in Slavic, then, like, it's not like English speakers will be coming into Gaelic with, like, usually no idea of what a grammatical case is. But they don't function in the same way, really. I say as someone who can speak enough Russian to say a prayer and ask where the church is. And half of that is Slavonic and not Russian anyway, so I don't really speak a Slavic language. But yeah, yes and no. They're similar insofar as they're both Indo-European languages with a case system and therefore related, but they're not similar, I think. Question 3. When did Scottish Gaelic split from Irish? Now, the Middle Irish, Early Classical Irish period is, I'm going from memory here, around sort of like the 10th to the 13th century, and this is usually considered the time period where they were last functionally the same language, but at that point there was regional dialectal variation. Just as there is today. So there would have been differences between a Gaelic speaker in Scotland and a Gaelic speaker in Ireland, or at least a Gaelic speaker in like a northerly bit of Scotland and an Irish speaker in like the southerly bit of Scotland, or should I say a cailleach speaker, I'm not sure how it was pronounced. So there were some differences, but they were like sort of minimal variation. So based on like when did the regional variation appear? Who knows when they started splitting, but they were definitely considered by everyone as being the same language up until the 11th or 12th century, I believe. And as I've mentioned before, Classical Gaelic, which is basically the language from that period, was continued to be used as sort of like an educated literary register or form of the language for much longer than that, up until 200 or 300 years ago. So yeah, somewhere between 400 and 1,000 years ago. Somewhere between 400 and 1,400 years ago. Yeah. Ceist. How often do you speak Gaelic? Did you learn it as a first language, and do most people you know speak it? Now, I did notice I answered this question about 2 years ago, and I'm like, yes, I speak Gaelic every day. All the people I know well speak it. It's great. That's not really my situation anymore, unfortunately. I think there are probably a lot of days now that I don't speak Gaelic. And a lot of people that I know that I'm quite close to that don't speak Gaelic. So, which has influenced how much I use it. So that's very unfortunate for me, I guess. And no, I didn't learn it as a first language. My mother doesn't speak it. My father doesn't really speak it. Both of them at this point know a few words, but grew up in a majority English-speaking household, and I learned Gaelic as a teenager. So yeah, I think that answers that question. Ceist a cailleach. How did Scotland preserve the Gaelic language in 1872? Now, a few years ago I did a course on Gaelic Leisicius Corusneach, development in the community. Anyway, where I memorised a whole bunch of dates for the history of Gaelic, which included 1872, which is when the Education Scotland Act was put into law, which basically very deliberately did not mention Gaelic in any place, made it legal to only use English in schools, made it only legal to use English in schools. So far from Scotland preserving the Gaelic language in 1872, this was one of the biggest nails in the coffin of Gaelic as a community language. But that sounds, I paused in that sentence because that sounds really morbid, like, oh yeah, Gaelic's dead as a community language, which, you know, it isn't yet, but the prospects are not good for that. But at the very least, the Education Act in 1872 it is a huge factor in it stopped Gaelic being a language of education. It stopped Gaelic being a language that had any sort of prestige whatsoever. And it caused many generations of school children to be forbidden from speaking Gaelic, to be beaten for speaking Gaelic, not only in school but around the school, in the playground, right up until there are reports of that still happening in the 70s and 80s. So that was a very negative thing for the Gaelic language, that happened in 1872. Heavy questions. Ceist, we're up to sheer. What does ifrinn mean in Gaelic? It means hell. What does inbhir mean in Gaelic? Inbhir, I'm just trying to think of what the English word is. I think the English word is estuary, but basically the mouth of the river where it meets the sea. So this is in a lot of places, like Inanish, which is the mouth of Loch Ness. Invercargill in New Zealand, which I don't know if there's a river Cargill, but I like to assume that there is. And also, interestingly, inbhir is the Gaelic word for it, and the Brittonic word is opper or aber. This is where you get towns like Aberystwyth, Aberfall, which is Falmouth in Cornish. But this is also because Brittonic language, either Pictish or Old Welsh, was spoken in a lot of Scotland for a long time, where you get place names like oighrean, Aberdeen, which is the Brittonic version of inbhir. How do you pronounce oighrean tuigse from a Scots Gaelic standpoint? From a Scots Gaelic standpoint? What other Scottish Gaelic words? What other standpoint is there? But yeah, oighrean tuigse is how I would pronounce that. Means like airs of understanding. So I don't know what people are going to be doing with that, or why they want to know how to pronounce it, or what other standpoint there is for pronouncing it. Say, oighrean tuigse. Oh, good grief, no. Oighrean tuigse. What does cailleach mean in Gaelic? Cailleach is an old lady. Now, I tend to use cailleach in the same way I would say babushka or yaya. To me, it's basically these are just different ethnicities of the same species. Cailleach and babushka and yaya. But, yeah, it's an old lady. The interesting thing about this word is it's gone through quite a semantic shift, and it does exemplify some interesting things about Gaelic. Because it was borrowed from Latin. It was borrowed from the Latin word pallium, which means a veil. And of course, this was the contact between Gaelic and Latin occurred, two things crucially. One, after we'd lost the p sound, and two, through Welsh. Obviously Patrick was from Wales, and because the cognate sounds are words that have a p in Welsh have a k in Gaelic. So when Gaelic speakers or Irish speakers or Old Irish speakers or whatever they were at that point, when they first encountered this word pallium, they encountered it probably from a Welsh speaker and went, oh, okay, Welsh words with a p, we have a k, so it would have been cailleach. So that's the first thing. And this is why we have Pascha is Easter, but then Cailleach. So there's a lot of interesting things like that. But this is one of those words that it was borrowed from Latin and had the sound shift applied by basis of analogy with Welsh, which I think is very interesting. So anyway, it was borrowed to mean veil. So then a cailleach, which is like a veily person, initially meant a nun, which it doesn't anymore. I guess people thought that nuns were usually old, so it started to mean old woman, and now it's like straight up just means old woman. There's none of these associations with veils and nuns, but I do find it very interesting that history is there. Okay, next question. What does cailleach stand for in Scottish slang? Well, for starters, this is written without the accent on the E, so what does cailleach stand for in Scottish slang? I have no idea what cailleach stands for in Scottish slang, although it's spelled like cailleach without the accent. Cailleach, for starters, is not Scottish slang, Scottish Gaelic. And for another, cailleach in Gaelic means visiting, but when you use it in English, it could mean anything from sort of like a song session, I guess, I would just say cailleach for this, to be quite honest, but, if you've got a song stuff, you've got a bunch of people sitting around, sometimes talking, sometimes singing, sometimes telling stories, probably snacks. There might be dancing. I mean, in Cape Breton, someone will start step dancing when someone's singing. That's just how it is there. But then this was borrowed in like the 50s and 60s folk revival culture, got really into country dancing, Scottish country dancing, which is similar to bush dancing for those Australians here. So cailleach was used to mean a folk dance. I also see cailleach being used by like Caledonian societies and such in the diaspora to refer to a sort of concert event. You'd have a hall with tables, so you're sitting there eating, and then there will be concerts up the front. There might be pipers, there might be dancers, there might be someone reciting a poem, but it's very much more of a concerty sort of thing. And then probably won't be you dancing, it's more like you watching other people dance and sing and tell poems, which is like, I guess, halfway between the two other options. I'm not sure, but yeah, that's what cailleach is. It's not Scottish slang, it's Gaelic, and as a word borrowed into English, it has these three different meanings. How does ashling mean in Gaelic? How? Anyway, ashling means a dream, but actually one of the more common words for dream is broadal. Final question, what does ghràdh mean in Scottish Gaelic? And that means my love. It was interesting, I have to say, because I can go on tangents about all of these things, as you've noticed. There's two words for love. There's more than two words for love, but there's two main ones, which are girl and ghràdh. Which you do get sometimes used next to each other. Like there's this cailleach, which is an Australian song. But then there's cailleach, which begins Mo girl, mo ghràdh is mea dalú. So it's got both of the words next to each other. But the difference is that girl is more intimate and ghràdh is more generic. Neither is sort of less intense or less close, and they do not track to the different Greek meanings for the words for love. But ghràdh is something that a cailleach would use to address literally anyone, whereas girl you will probably leave for a family member or a romantic partner. So yeah, that's all for today. Tuirí an drásta agus cíimi se bhela a nachachcin.